In today's video, I wanted to continue my journey through the Imperial Legion's questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Last time, I enlisted with General Darius and the Deathsheet Legion over in Nissus. He had me perform various tasks like recovering the deed to a local house, curing a Quama Queen of Blight, rescuing a fellow legionnaire from Arvstrellan, and uncovering a conspiracy against the Emperor by the Talos cult. Then, once his duties were tapped dry, I visited Imsin the Dreamer at Fort Buckmoth. She had me find evidence to support the claim that Drynar Varian of Aldrune was a smuggler. A lot of these quests seemed like they were shallow on the outside. However, after looking a little deeper, some of them revealed so much more about the current political climate on Vvardenfell and the true colors of its inhabitants. This is where the journey continues. Chatting once more with Imsin, I asked her for more work. She told me that a knight of the Order of Ebonheart needed rescuing. His name is Joncis Dalomax. She continues and says that he's being held in the Daedric ruin of Ashur-nabibi. This ruin is near the village of Hla'oad, which is to the northwest of here. Apparently, the Legion can't afford the ransom, so I'm to bust in there and free him by whatever means necessary. I'd imagine the outlaws who kidnapped him were asking for a whole lot of gold, as I feel otherwise the Legion would have been able to pay up no problem. Leaving Fort Buckmoth, I took the Siltstrider services to a dock, and from there sailed all the way to Hla'oad. Ashur-nabibi was surprisingly really close to the village, like less than 100 meters away close. Running up to it, the first enemy I encountered was a winged twilight, and it was a foreshadow of things to come. Against nuisance creatures, my weak broadsword does the trick just fine. However, against Daedra and outlaws, well, it isn't the most efficient. One of the things I had to look out for now was not taking too many hits in battle. Apart from the obvious reasons, I didn't want the boots of blinding speed to break, and then I was stuck moving at a km/h pace. Finding the way to the center of the ruin, I then came across a couple of frost atronachs. Even though it sort of goes against my whole only Imperial gear run, I feel like magic is in the gray area, so I wiped them out using fire spells. At first, the destruction spells I used were fairly basic ones, and took forever to drain them of their health. Then I switched to my overpowered ones, and the ball got rolling nice and quickly. The only other NPC out here with me was an orc, and I was able to get nice and close to them, so I assumed that she was friendly. However, after attempting to interact with her, she became hostile, pulled out a blade, and chased me around. An orc at a Daedric shrine? That could only mean one thing, most of the time, that there was a Malakath shrine on the inside. Entering Ashur-nabibi, I ended up being right, although it didn't really help me with anything. In the actual shrine area itself, there were two more orcs that needed to be taken care of. One of them was a sorcerer, and forgetting that I had my powerful fire attacks equipped, I accidentally wiped him right away. Pulling my broadsword back out, I approached the final orc, a barbarian, and engaged in some good old-fashioned weapon-to-weapon combat. Truth be told, it took forever for her health to come down, and she was actually doing a pretty good number on me. I was forced to pop a few health potions, and wanting to just get the fight over with, I wiped her with my fire attacks. I strayed a little bit away from my challenge for this questline, but I towed the line for the next handful. With all of the threats defeated, I helped myself to the nearby treasures, and then unlocked the door where Dalomax was being held. Joncis was standing around, and speaking with him, he thanked me for slaying his captors, and said that he was able to find his own way out. There were a few more areas to explore in the ruins, but as I've learned these lessons the hard way before, I didn't want to interfere with any possible future quests. So, recalling to Fort Buckmoth, I spoke with Imsin, and she asked me for updates on Dalomax. I informed her of his safe return, and she thanked me for my efforts. With that, thus ends the quest, Rescue Joncis Dalomax. Chatting again with Imsin, I asked her for more orders. She told me that I need to retrieve a Maiden's token and bring it back to her. Intrigued, I inquired further about it. Apparently, there's a rogue Telvanni wizard named Verona Nelas who's blackmailing a buoyant armiger. This armiger is secretly in a relationship with someone, and apparently it would come as a scandal if word ever got out. I'm to go to Asumanu near Aldredania and retrieve the glove by whatever means necessary. Aldredania is apparently west of the Sheogorath region, way to the north of here. I suppose it goes against a buoyant armager's duties to have external affairs like this. I don't know why it's a big deal, other than the assumption that maybe they're under oath to not take wives, husbands, or lovers of any kind. As for why an outcast Telvanni wizard would want to blackmail them, your guess is as good as mine. The armigers at the Ghost Gate come across a lot of weird and wicked creatures out by that area. Maybe the wizard wants a sample of some kind. There are also a lot of 6th house bases and Dwemer artifacts out that way, so perhaps that could be an angle as well. In any case, once I hit the Sheogored region, I levitated, leapt, and walked all the way to Albredania, and from there, I located the caves of Asumanu to the southeast. Going on inside, there was a storm atronach guarding the path ahead. Due to its hostility, I assumed that any other NPCs I'd come across were going to be enemies as well. So I sort of jumped the gun when it came to the wood elf, Alamir. I cast a powerful fireball at him, killing him right away. Thinking that was all part of the dungeon, I stepped over his corpse and cautiously approached a camp at the end of the passage. I spotted Verona Nelas, the rogue Telvanni, and fortunately she wasn't hostile, at least not right now. Speaking with her, I asked about the Maiden's token, and she replied that I was audacious to even ask for such a thing after the whole incident with Alamir. The conversation ended with her saying that it was my turn to now die, and the fight began. To be honest, it wasn't really an even matchup, more of a one-sided beatdown. I continuously swung away at her with my Imperial broadsword, staggering her, causing flinch damage, and not letting Verona get a single hit off. One thing that worked in my favor for this crummy blade was that it was good at keeping my opponents at bay. Enemies without proper defense, namely mages and creatures, were easy wins. After Nelas was slain, I looked into her inventory and spotted a unique gauntlet called Ilmeni's Glove. Technically, I haven't yet learned who the token belonged to, but at this point, I think it was safe to assume that it was this Ilmeni. Now, because I really scuffed up that beginning part, I wanted to see what a calmer and more communicative interaction with Verona would be like. Running along past Alamir, who, wouldn't you know it, turned out to be a friendly NPC, I approached Nelas on friendly terms. This time, when asked about the token, because her disposition was low, she said that she could tell me everything I needed to know about it, but wouldn't due to her not liking me. So, backing out, charming her, and trying again, this time, she said that the glove belonged to Ilmeni Dren over in Vivec. She gave it to a buoyant armiger, and she's the one who doesn't want the secret to get out. Verona freely hands me the token, saying that she has better things to occupy herself with. With both outcomes on the table, my character's canon was storming in there, killing Alamir, and then slaying Nelas for the glove. After doing a little bit of research, neither NPC affects any other storyline, and I thought my original approach was very on brand for the average Elder Scrolls experience, at the very least my personal ones. I would have thought that the buoyant armiger would be the one to not want the secret getting out, due to a sworn oath or something like that, but Nelas made it sound like it was Ilmeni's secret being kept, which I found to be very interesting. After doing a little bit of digging, it turns out that this Ilmeni is Duke Vedum Dren's daughter, the very same Duke of Ebonheart. So now I think I understand the story. It could be spun that they're from two different social classes, one a noble and the other a glorified guard. No disrespect to the armigers. It could also be said that the Duke is heavily involved with the Empire, and therefore Ilmeni is too by association. On the other hand, the armiger is a loyal warrior to Vivec and the Temple, which puts them at odds with the Empire. Either way you look at it, it's a pretty neat situation that they're in. Now, interestingly, if the player knows where to find Ilmeni Dren, the glove can be returned directly to her. She resides in the South 3 building of the St. Delen Canal. She doesn't really have any intriguing dialogue when the token is returned though. The main benefit is that you get a disposition boost with her. In my case, since Verona Nelas was killed, I could have easily just returned to Imsin the Dreamer back in Fort Buckmoth and given her my report. She says that since the Telvanni wizard is dead, the secret is dead with her, which works for me. With that, thus ends the quest, Maiden's Token. Chatting once more with Imsin the Dreamer, she opened the conversation by saying that I was ready for my next advancement, which I figured was about time. Imsin promoted me to the rank of Knight Errant, and along with it came some sweet new gear upgrades. She handed me an Imperial Templar Knight Cuirass, as well as matching greaves. I was excited to put them on and embark on my next mission with her, but When asked for more orders, she informed me that our time together was at an end. She sent me off to report to the other commanding officers at the remaining forts of Moonmoth and Ebonheart. Exiting the conversation, I got a better look at the new armor. All things considered, the pieces looked really cool, but due to my below average heavy armor skill, they didn't offer much of an upgrade. In any case, I threw them on and made way for my next adventure. Considering the importance of Ebonheart, I wanted to save those quests for last, and Fort Moonmoth just felt like the right choice at this moment. So, traveling over to the hometown of Balmora and legging it east, I arrived at the Imperial outpost. Going on inside, the man in charge made himself accessible and easy to find. Rad Hardheart was literally the first NPC I laid eyes on, and approaching him, I asked him for my first set of orders. Hardheart gave me a pretty simple one to start with. Apparently, the Armigers have challenged the Legionnaires to a hunt, so Rad tasks me with destroying a Dwemer Centurion and bringing him a piece of scrap metal. Curious about the whole thing, I asked for further details. The Ordinators challenged the Empire and declared that they would bring in the skin of a corpus beast as a trophy. Rad thinks that the Legion can one-up them though by collecting scrap metal from a fallen Dwarven Centurion. He directs me to the nearby Dwemer ruins of Arkanthan, but warns me that it's crawling with bandits. You know, in my opinion, I think the Armigers have the Legionnaires beat here. They're going to obtain the skin of a mighty diseased beast from an area that's been sealed off for centuries. And here I am being sent off to collect a steamed Centurion's jockstrap. Obviously, I'm fudging the details a bit here and downplaying Dwemer ruins, but I think the Armigers mission sounds a whole lot more interesting. Luckily, Arkanthan was the first dungeon that I had to go through for the main questline. Everything is pretty much already cleared out, and finding Dwarven scrap metal shouldn't be that difficult. Even if the bandits were still alive, the ruins are an incredibly low-level dungeon, and defeating them wouldn't have been an easy issue at all for a level 21 character. I suppose if the player decides to pursue Rad's quests early on, the tasks would match well with their skill level and create a really great learning environment. As mentioned before, Arkanthan was completely void of life, and if anything, that made it all the more eerie. Interestingly though, I don't remember there actually being any Dwarven Centurions in here. I'm pretty sure it was just the bandits, so even though NPCs needed to be defeated, was it really a hunt? Or at least, the hunt that the Armigers challenged the Legion to. In any case, once I located a piece of scrap metal in a container, I was pretty much good to go here. Like I said before, a nice and easy task. Returning to Rad Hardheart, he asked for the Dwemer trophy piece, and I handed it over. The Nord said that the Legion's victory was practically secured, and as a reward, he gifted me 500 septums, which hey, I won't complain about. With that, thus ends the quest, Scrap Metal. Chatting again with Rad, I asked him for further orders. Hardheart said that he needs a knight-errant to rescue someone named Jocien Ancois. The name sounds French to me, and Bretons usually have a European flair to their name, so I'm putting a French spin on it. Apparently, Ancois has been trying to teach the Arabinimson Ashlander tribe the ways of the Empire. However, he's since been taken and hasn't contacted anyone. Rad wants me to find Jocien and free him from his captors. Lucky for me, I've had direct dealings with the Arabinimson already. They played a vital role in becoming the Nerevarine for the main questline, and let's just say there's a lot of history between us. The thing I dislike the most about Ashlander tribes is that most of their camps are so far away from civilization and travel ports. Some are worse than others, like the Urshiliku and Arabinimson, which require a lot of legwork to get to. However, the Ahumusa are pretty good. In order to actually get to this camp, I had to travel to Ebonheart, then to Azura's Coast region. From there, I leapt and levitated my way over to the ashy barren lands. The new Arabinimson Ashcan was Han Amu. Entering his yurt and chatting with him, I asked what had happened to Jocien. He told me that the tribe sent Ancois over to a small clan called the Mabergash, as they apparently wanted to hear his teachings of the Empire. When asked about the Mabergash, Han Amu tells me that their leader is an excommunicated wise woman. Her and her other members steal a man's essence to fuel their powers as sorceresses, hence why Jocien was taken. Their setup is to the west of here, along the lava banks. Exiting the conversation and leaving the Arabinimson camp, I cased the westward lava streams and kept my eyes out for the Mabragash. And Amu warned me that their outpost would be hard to find, especially in this landscape. It wasn't super tricky to locate, but it definitely wasn't very easy either. I traveled further than I thought I had to, and second-guessed a lot of my navigation. Along the way, I came across my fair share of enemies, both of the nuisance and real deal variety. Eventually, I spotted a lone yurt tucked away in the rocky hills and approached it. There were a few NPCs wandering around, and I wasn't sure if they'd be hostile or not, but to my surprise, they were friendly. When asked about Jocien, they told me to go inside of the hut and speak with Zenamu. Heeding their advice, I went on in and laid eyes on Ancois. Talking with him real quick, he said that he wasn't going to leave until his captors were dealt with. So, the negotiations with Zenamu began. The Dark Elf said that they can't work their magic without a man's presence, whatever magic that might be. She does say though that she'd be willing to trade Jocien for a better man, one who's stronger-willed, braver, younger, and handsomer. She specifically calls out Asababentis, a hunter for the Arabinimson, as the perfect replacement. If I can get him to come here, she'll gladly let Ancois go in exchange. To be honest, I wasn't sure how this one was going to play out. The Mabragash already have a reputation among the Arabinimson, and I don't see anyone willingly wanting to meet with them, especially a man. I had half a mind to just kill the Mabragash, but I wanted to play things out properly here. Dooming one man in order to free another did feel kind of wrong and against what the Legion would have wanted, but I guess that's just how this one's going to go. Returning to the Ashlander tribe, I spotted Asababentis and spoke with him. When the Mabragash were brought up, he was appalled at the idea of living with them. He then asked if he looked like a fool who would fall for their charms. The two prompts to roll with were either asking him if he's afraid of a few women, or if he's worried that he won't be able to resist their charms. Choosing the latter, Asaba reveals that Mimanu, one of the other women there, already tried her magic on him, and it didn't work. This was when I egged him on and mentioned that he probably couldn't do it a second time. He felt challenged by that and said that he'll do it again with no problems, and told me to lead the way to their camp. A simple enough convincement, I led the very slow Asababentis over to the Mabragash, and as soon as he entered their camp, I got my journal update. He assured me that he wouldn't be here long and to not worry about him. Water under the bridge already, I went inside the yurt and asked for Jocien's immediate release. With a new man at their camp, Zenamu agreed to let him go. Speaking with Jocien, he thanked me for freeing him and said that he was going to return to the Arabinimson in order to continue his teachings. Sounding good with me, I recalled to Fort Moonmoth and reported back to Rad. He was glad to hear Ancois was released and called it good work. With that, thus ends the quest, rescue Jocien and Ancois. Chatting with Heart, I asked for further orders. He informed me that an Imperial citizen named Dandsa needs rescuing from the Abernannet caves. Rad explains that she's being held captive. Abernannet is on an island southeast of Narmok and shouldn't be too tricky to get to. So far, it seems like there are a lot of rescue missions for the Imperial Legion questline. I suppose if the citizen bows down to the Empire, then it's the Legion's job to rescue them here on Vardenfell, and not any of the local authorities. A lot of the rescue tasks have also been for people who serve closely to the Empire, like the tax collector in Arvstrellen, the soldier in the Daedric Ruin, and then Ancois from the Mabragash camp. To me, a lot of these quests play like the Fighters Guild ones. I feel like there are a lot of similar jobs to do, and at any point, they could easily be interchanged with one another. I guess it makes sense since both are officially sanctioned government factions that deal with aiding the locals. Arriving at Narmok, I made way for the tiny island to the southeast. Looking around for a bit, I found the doorway leading into the Abernannet caverns and went on in. Unsure of what to expect, the first thing I came across was a rat, so no big deal there. Venturing further and beyond a trapdoor, the bandits started to appear. They really weren't that tricky to beat though, even with my basic broadsword. Speaking of which, at this point, I was desperately waiting for my next weapons upgrade. I had no idea when it was coming and assumed it would either be given as a reward for a job well done or as a promotion award. Nothing against the broadsword, but I want some sort of change up. After defeating only 2 outlaws, I located Dandsa by their camp and told her that I was here for the rescue. She then followed me out of the caves, which wasn't a very far walk to begin with. Exiting Abernannet, Dandsa told me she would swim back to Narmok and hop on the first boat back to Hammerfell. Sounding good with me, my job was done and I recalled to Fort Moonmoth. Informing Rad of my success, he said he was glad to hear it, which felt like a pretty lame affirmation. There was also no reward given out either, so there's that. With that, thus ends the quest, Rescue Dandsa. Returning to Rad, he said that I was ready for my next advancement. Fingers crossed for a new blade, he promoted me to the rank of Knight Bachelor and handed over new gear. Unfortunately, no weapons were added to the fold, but he did build upon the Imperial Templar set. Hardheart gifted me the helm and bracers to go with my cuirass and greaves. The fit was looking pretty good, and I gave off some serious Roman warrior vibes. The armor rating was atrocious though, once again rendering me practically defenseless. Back to the matter at hand, I chatted with Rad and asked for further orders. This is when he gave me quite the interesting task, and when I say interesting, I mean that it's a fairly familiar one. The job itself was pretty boring. He tasked me with killing the pair of breeding Netch that were causing issues over in Narmok. That's about all I got out of Hardheart for this one. As it turns out, this Imperial Legion quest is also a miscellaneous quest. I suppose whichever one the player gets to first, rumors from the fishing village or following Imperial orders is where you'd hear about it. Now, I had a brief conversation with a commenter regarding the Legion's questline and cut content. I haven't looked too much into the specifics, but I do know that it had a fair share of its story cut out. I'm assuming it was due to time crunches, disk space, etc., but it makes me wonder if that's why this breeding Netch miscellaneous quest was thrown into the mix. Was this a quick substitute for a much more elaborate quest, or was it an intentional design choice? I can't find much online regarding it, but I'm leaning more towards last-minute exchange for something that had a little more depth. Back to the matter at hand, all I knew was that there was a pair of Netch to the north that needed to be slain. The issue was that there were so many of them in the area, and I had no idea which ones were causing the problems. So, I didn't feel good about this, because they're beautiful creatures, but I pretty much went on a rampage and massacred a handful of them. The only sort of update I received was a notification that I killed a breeding Netch. However, I never got a second one, so I assumed that my job wasn't done, and more of them needed to be slain. Eventually, I figured enough was enough, and upon returning to Narmok, the citizens confirmed that I was done here, as they thanked me for taking care of their Netch problem. The last thing I saw as I recalled to Moonmoth were the corpses littering the surrounding area. Again, I felt pretty bad about it, but it needed to be done. After telling Rad of the slaughter, he called it good work, which I didn't think so, and that was about it. With that, thus ends the quest, breeding Netch. Chatting with Hardheart once more, I asked him for my next set of orders. This is when he gave me a pretty interesting task, and this time I actually mean interesting. Apparently, there's a necromancer named Sorkvild The Raven who lives near the town of Dagon Fell. Rad explains that the Dunmer despise necromancy, and it would go a long way for them if the Legion were the ones to take action against Sorkvild. So, I'm to travel north to the region, locate the Raven, and slay him. Sounding like a pretty fun mission, I exited the fort and made my way for the Sheogorath region. A long time ago, when I was passing through Dagon Fell, one of the citizens there told me about the legends of Sorkvild. I was tempted to seek him out, but now I'm really glad I didn't, as that would have interfered with this quest. Arriving at the Imperial fishing village, I began asking around for clues on where I could find the necromancer. One of my fellow legionnaires told me that everyone gets the creeps from Sorkvild, and that his tower was on the east side of town. Fortunately, I didn't really have to look that far. From where I was standing, I saw the old Dwemer Tower that peeked over the rocky hills. Floating over, there wasn't much defense on the outside, and I was able to just walk on in. Going down the entranceway, I was brought to a room that had an enemy NPC in it. He was decked out with kitten armor, chitin armor, one sounds weird and the other sounds off, but anyways, he was giving me a beatdown with his dwarven mace. I swung away at him with my broadsword, and once I got him down to around half, I switched over to some weaker fire spells. I was more so worried that my boots were going to break, and that I'd be extremely slow in the coming battles. With Laura Longleg bested, I located the ladder leading further into Sorkvild's tower, and it was here I spotted the necromancer. The Raven was immediately hostile towards me and threw around a few shock spells. Luckily, his moves were extremely predictable and very easy to time, as with every cast, I could sidestep and avoid taking damage. Eventually, he got desperate and pulled out his enchanted axe. It wasn't enough to save him though, and after a few more swings, Sorkvild the Necromancer went down. Amazingly, in his inventory, the Nord had the Mask of Clavicus Vile. This Daedric artifact is a heavy armor helmet that fortifies the wearer's personality by 30 points. I've only ever seen it in Oblivion, and there, it was the reward for Clavicus Vile's Daedric Shrine quest. This was a really sweet find, and depending on how things go, I'd maybe like to replace it for my Templar helmet. Looking around Sorkvild's lair, there were certainly some unsettling sights. Human remains, eerie red lighting, books with off-putting subjects. He did a good job at setting up his evil lair. I looted my desired treasures, including a Daedric dagger, and then made my descent. Before leaving, I did a little more exploring and came across 2 more hostile NPCs. One of them, Gils Derethi, had some decent enchanted goods on them. The next one though, Medetl, had a unique short blade called the Saint's Black Sword. It had the enchantments of Fortify Fatigue for 1 to 10 points for 20 seconds, and Fortify Health for 10 points for 1 second. Definitely not a bad weapon to have. I'd consider using it, but my character isn't proficient with short swords. Maybe one day soon, I'll pay for the training and expand my gameplay. For now though, my job was done, and I recalled to Fort Moonmoth. Rad asked for a report on the Raven, and I informed him of his demise. He called it good work, and left it at that. I suppose the mask and the Saint's Sword were all the rewards that I needed for this one. With that, thus ends the quest, Sorkvild the Raven.